She didn't scream. She didn't beg. She didn't even cry. She just picked up her suitcase slowly, deliberately, and walked toward the door while the rain outside hammered the windows like it knew something terrible was happening inside that house. Her husband stood in the living room with his arms crossed, his jaw tight, his eyes cold. "Make it quick," he said. "She'll be here by 10. And his wife, the woman who had cooked his meals, ironed his shirts, sat beside him through every failure and every fear, simply turned around, looked at him one last time, and said something he would never forget for the rest of his life. "One day, you'll beg to know who you asked to leave." Then she walked out into the rain, and the door closed behind her. He didn't know it yet, but he had just made the worst decision of his life. Before we dive deeper, let us know in the comments where you're watching from and the time it is over there. We'd love to hear from you. And if you're new here, click the subscribe button so you never miss any of our upcoming videos. Now, let's get into the story. His name was Daniel Osei, 38 years old, sales director at a mid-sized logistics company in the city. The kind of man who wore his ambition like a cologne. You could smell it before he even walked into a room. He drove a car that was slightly above his pay grade, wore watches that cost more than his monthly rent, and kept a running list in his head of everyone who had made it further than him and why that was unacceptable. Daniel believed in optics. He believed that how things looked was almost as important as how things were. Maybe more important. He had built his entire adult life around that belief, and for a while it had worked. He had climbed. He had hustled. He had pushed his way into rooms he wasn't born into. But there was one part of his life that didn't fit the image he had carefully constructed for himself. His wife. Her name was Amara. 35. Quiet. Graceful in a way that didn't announce itself. She wore simple clothes, not because she didn't care, but because she seemed unbothered by the whole performance of dressing to impress. She didn't post on social media. She had no designer handbags, no loud friends, no extravagant birthday parties. When Daniel's colleagues brought their wives to company events, they arrived draped in labels and loud laughter. Amara arrived with a soft smile and genuine curiosity about whoever she was talking to. She remembered people's names. She asked follow-up questions. She listened like she actually meant it. To most people, she was lovely. To Daniel, she had become a problem. It hadn't always been that way. When they met 7 years ago, he had been drawn to exactly that quietness. After the noise and chaos of his 20s, the wrong women, the wasted energy, the exhausting game of appearances, Amara had felt like stillness, like arriving somewhere after a long journey. He had loved her for it. He had married her for it. But love, for a man like Daniel, was a thing that existed in seasons. And somewhere along the way, his season for appreciating stillness had ended. Now he wanted spectacle. He had started noticing it at events. How other men's wives laughed louder, dressed better, worked the room with the ease of people who had grown up surrounded by money. How Amara sat quietly at the table, talking to whoever happened to sit next to her, completely unmoved by the social chess game happening around her. He had started to feel a quiet irritation watching her, like she was holding him back without even knowing it. "Why don't you dress up more?" he had asked her once, after a gala dinner. She had looked at him with those calm eyes of hers and said, "I thought I looked nice." "You looked fine. I mean, our table was full of executives' wives, Amara. You wore a simple dress. Was it inappropriate?" He didn't answer, because no, it wasn't inappropriate. It was just ordinary. And ordinary to Daniel had become unbearable. The comments had escalated slowly, almost gently at first, suggestions masked as concern. Then they became criticism. Then, eventually, contempt. "You don't have a single connection. Not one person in your circle who can open a door for me. You never push yourself. Don't you have any ambition at all? I need a partner who matches where I'm going, Amara. Not someone who's comfortable staying small." Every time he said something like that, she absorbed it. She didn't fight back. She didn't defend herself. She just looked at him quietly, and something behind her eyes, something old and patient and deeply private, would flicker for a moment, and then go still again. He took her silence for submission. He took her calmness for weakness. He took her simplicity for lack. He was wrong about all three. Meanwhile, a woman named Vivian had entered the picture. Vivian was everything Amara was not, at least on the surface. She was loud, flashy, socially magnetic. She had a lifestyle Instagram with 40,000 followers. She wore clothes that people noticed from across the room. She laughed at all of Daniel's jokes and gasped at all of his stories and looked at him like he was the most impressive man she had ever met. She went to his work events and worked the room with him, and afterward his colleagues would nudge him and say things like, "Now that's someone who fits the life you're building." And Daniel, a man who had always needed other people's confirmation to feel certain about his own choices, heard that and felt it like gospel. The affair had begun 8 months ago. He told himself it was just temporary, that it didn't mean anything, that he would end it. But the truth was that every time he came home to Amara's quiet and measured presence, he felt exposed, like her calmness was a mirror, and he didn't like what it showed him. Vivian never made him feel that way. Vivian reflected back the version of himself he preferred, powerful, desirable, exceptional. So he stopped trying to end it. And the lies piled up the way they always do, slowly at first, then all at once. By the time the rain fell on that Tuesday evening, Daniel had already made up his mind. He had made it up weeks ago, honestly. He had already spoken to a lawyer quietly, already started mentally dividing their assets, already, in his most private moments, started imagining what his life would look like with Vivian in it. What he hadn't done was imagine what it would look like without Amara. That night, when he told her to pack her things, he expected one of two reactions, either tears and begging or cold anger and accusations. He had prepared responses for both. He was ready. What he was not ready for was the way she simply nodded, like she had been waiting. "Is this what you want, Daniel?" she asked him. Her voice was steady, not angry, not broken, just clear. "Yes," he said firmly. "It is." "Then I'll go." "Amara." "No." She held up one hand, not to silence him, but to stop his obligation. "You don't need to explain anything. I've understood for a long time." He blinked. That sentence unsettled him more than he expected. "What does that mean?" "It means what it means," she said softly. And then she went to their bedroom and packed a single suitcase. Not two, not three, one. Like she had always known she would only be here temporarily. Like she had never fully unpacked her life into this house. He stood in the living room and listened to the sounds of drawers opening and closing, shoes being placed, a zipper sealing shut. And then she came back out, suitcase in hand, coat over her arm, and she looked at him. "Goodbye, Daniel. You can call your sister," he said awkwardly. "I won't rush the legal process." She almost smiled. Not a bitter smile. Something closer to pity. "I appreciate that." She walked to the door, opened it. The rain came in cold and sideways. And then she said it, the line that would replay in his mind for months. "One day, you'll beg to know who you asked to leave." And then she was gone. He stood there for a moment, in the silence of the house, with the door still slightly open and the rain misting in. Then he shut it, poured himself a drink, and called Vivian. "She's gone," he said. "Finally," Vivian said. He laughed, but somehow the laugh felt hollow, like something was already wrong, and he just didn't have the language for it yet. Outside, Amara stood under a small awning 2 houses down from the one she had just left. She was not crying. She had not cried in months. Not because the pain wasn't real, but because she had already done most of her grieving quietly, alone, long before tonight. She reached into her coat pocket and pulled out a phone. Not the phone Daniel knew about. A simple device with very few contacts. This one was different, sleeker. She dialed a number she rarely called. It rang twice. "Miss Amara." The voice on the other end was formal. Calm. Is everything all right? Send the car, she said. I'm ready to come home. A pause. Then, yes, ma'am. It will be there in 15 minutes. She hung up. She stood in the rain, her one suitcase beside her. And she breathed in and out like someone releasing something they'd been holding for a very long time. 7 years. She had held it for 7 years. The car that arrived was not a taxi. It was a black Mercedes Maybach with tinted windows and a driver in a dark suit who stepped out, opened an umbrella, and held it over her without being asked. Welcome back, ma'am, he said. Thank you, Joseph, she replied and got in. And as the car pulled away from the modest street where she had spent the past 7 years quietly hiding in plain sight, Amara Kessington, born Amara Kessington Darko, only daughter of Kwame Darko, founder of Darko Industries, one of the largest privately held industrial conglomerates on the continent, leaned her head back against the leather seat and closed her eyes. She had never wanted the money. That had never been the lie she was living. The lie she had been living was the belief that love could exist cleanly, honestly, without power distorting it. She had believed, genuinely, naively, hopefully, that if she removed herself from the shadow of her family's wealth, she could find a man who loved her for who she was, not what she was worth. And she thought she had found that in Daniel. In the beginning, before his insecurity had grown bigger than his heart. Before status had become his religion and she had become his embarrassment. The estate came into view as the car passed through the gates. Massive, manicured, lit with a soft warmth that made it look like a painting. Staff lined the entrance hall when she walked in. Not as a performance, but as a genuine welcome from people who had known her since she was a child. Welcome home, Miss Amara. It's good to have you back. We've prepared your rooms, ma'am. She thanked each of them by name. She always had. Her father was upstairs. Kwame Darko, 71 years old, the kind of man whose presence filled whatever room he occupied even when he was being quiet. He was sitting in the dim light of his private sitting room, wearing his reading glasses, a heavy blanket across his legs. He had been unwell for 3 months, a fact that only a handful of people in the world knew. When Amara walked in, he looked up, and something in his face, something behind the tiredness, softened completely. You came back, he said. I came back, she said, and sat beside him and took his hand. They didn't speak for a while. They didn't need to. Then he said, How long are you staying? For good, Papa, she said. I'm staying for good. He nodded slowly, like he had waited a long time to hear those words. Good, he said simply. Good. Back across town, Vivian moved into the house 3 days later. She came with 12 suitcases, 2 friends who helped her arrange things, a scented candle that cost more than Daniel made in a day, and an energy that was entirely different from what the house had held before. The first week was something close to what Daniel had imagined. The apartment felt alive in a new way. There was noise and laughter and late-night wine and the kind of excitement that felt like a beginning. But beginnings are deceptive things. By the second week, the cracks were beginning to show. Vivian ran the credit card Daniel had given her for household expenses. She ran it hard. She ordered things she called investments, furniture, clothes, experiences, and explained them with a breezy confidence that made questioning them feel like an insult. This sofa cost how much? Daniel asked one evening, staring at a delivery receipt. It's Italian, baby. Do you know how much that sofa will appreciate? It's a sofa, Vivian. It sits people. She rolled her eyes. You have to think about the environment you're creating. Your clients come here. Your colleagues see the space. You need to look like you've arrived. That was the word she used constantly. Arrived. It was a word that usually worked on Daniel, the same way a blade works best on skin that's already been thinned. But lately, when Vivian said it, something in him resisted. Because the house that he had once shared with a woman who bought nothing and asked for nothing had never once felt this expensive. 2 weeks became a month, and the month brought reality crashing in like a cold front. Vivian argued, Not just with him, with his housekeeper, who she eventually fired and replaced with her own cousin. With his friends' wives on a WhatsApp group he didn't know she had joined. With the security guard at his company's parking lot over a misunderstanding about a visitor's pass. She was confrontational in a way that Daniel, in his excitement, had misread as confidence. But confidence doesn't pick unnecessary fights. What Vivian had was something else. Something exhausting. And the noise. Daniel was realizing now that there was a very specific kind of noise that peace creates when it's absent. An absence noise. A fullness that isn't fullness. He came home from work and felt his shoulders rise instead of fall. He started staying late at the office, for the first time in his career, just to delay coming home. At night, lying awake while Vivian slept, he would think about the strange quiet of his old life. The way Amara used to have dinner ready without announcement. The way she never started arguments at the door. The way the house had felt like somewhere to recover rather than somewhere to survive. He pushed the thoughts away. This was what he wanted, he told himself. This was better. But the body knows things the mind refuses to admit. And his body was tired. It was 6 weeks after Amara left that the news broke. Daniel was sitting in his office, going through invoices, when his colleague Marcus knocked on the open door. "Hey," Marcus said, with the careful tone of someone delivering information they don't know how to frame. Did you see the news this morning?" Daniel didn't look up. "What news?" "The Darko news." Something about the way he said it made Daniel look up. "Kwame Darko died last night," Marcus said slowly. "The old man, founder of Darko Industries. They say his daughter is taking over the whole empire." Daniel frowned. "Darko Industries? That's the multi-billion-dollar conglomerate, yes. The one with the ports, the mining interests, the real estate division. They say it's the largest private industrial holding on the continent." Daniel turned back to his invoices. "I don't know much about that world. What's the daughter's name?" Silence. He looked up. Marcus was staring at him with an expression Daniel couldn't immediately read. "Her name is Amara," he said quietly. "Amara Kessington Darko." The invoice in Daniel's hand floated out of his fingers and landed on the desk without him noticing. His mouth opened. Nothing came out. "They released photos," Marcus said, and he held out his phone. Daniel took it with a hand that had gone slightly numb. On the screen was a business news article, and at the top of the article was a photograph. A woman in a tailored ivory suit, her hair pulled back, standing outside a glass building with the composure of someone who had been born to stand exactly there. Her face was unmistakable. It was Amara, his Amara, the woman he had told to pack one suitcase and leave before 10 o'clock so his girlfriend could move in. The room tilted. Daniel reached for the edge of his desk to steady himself without being aware that he was doing it. He read the caption beneath the photograph. Amara Kessington Darko, sole heir and newly appointed CEO of Darko Industries, following the passing of founder Kwame Darko. Net worth estimated at $4.20 billion. $4.2 billion. He had told a billionaire to take her things and leave. He had called her ordinary. He had called her unconnected. He had told her she didn't match the life he was building. The phone slipped from his hands and cracked against the desk. He didn't pick it up. "You okay?" Marcus asked carefully. Daniel didn't answer. Because no, he was not okay. He was standing in the rubble of the most catastrophic decision of his life, and the rubble was still falling. If you're still watching up to now, type, "I'm still here" in the comments section. This story is just getting to its most powerful moment, and we want to know you're with us. He drove to the estate that evening. He hadn't called. He hadn't planned what to say. He had driven on instinct, the way a man drives when his mind is too stunned to argue with his foot on the gas. The gates were exactly as he'd imagined. Tall iron, flanked by stone walls that stretched in both directions further than he could see. A guardhouse, a uniformed man who stepped out and raised one hand. Can I help you, sir? Daniel swallowed. I'm here to see Amara. Tell her Daniel is here. Her husband. A pause. Your name, sir? Daniel Osei. The guard made a brief call, said nothing, waited, then looked back at Daniel. I'm sorry, sir. Ma'am is not receiving visitors at this time. Daniel gripped the steering wheel. Please, just tell her I need to speak with her. Tell her it's important. Another call. Another wait. Ma'am says she's aware, and that you may leave a written message if you wish. A written message. Like he was a creditor. Like he was nobody. He drove away. He came back the next morning. And the one after that. On the fourth day, the guard met him at the gate before he had even turned the engine off. She'll see you, sir. Please follow. His heart hammered the entire drive up the tree-lined driveway. The house, the estate, was overwhelming up close. Not flashy, but powerful in the way that old, serious money feels powerful. There was nothing about it designed to impress. It simply existed, self-contained, as if the opinions of outsiders were genuinely beside the point. He was shown into a reception room and left there. White walls, tall windows, flowers in a crystal vase. Silence. She made him wait for 20 minutes. Not cruelly. Just enough for the room to do its work on him. Then she came in. He almost didn't recognize her. Not because she looked different, but because she looked more herself than he had ever seen her. She wore a simple, perfectly cut dress. Her posture was different. Not stiff, but unhurried in a way that spoke of someone who had stopped performing ease and was simply living it. She sat across from him and folded her hands in her lap and waited. Amara, he started. Daniel, she said. That was all. Just his name. But in her voice, his name had the weight of everything she'd never said. I saw the news, he said. I know. I can't, he stopped. Started again. How long? How long did you know? Since before we met, she said simply. It's who I am. He exhaled a long breath. Why didn't you tell me? She looked at him the way a teacher looks at a student who has asked the question that proves they still don't understand the lesson. Think about that question, Daniel, she said softly. Think about it carefully. He thought about it. And even as he was thinking, the answer was building itself in his chest like a wave. She hadn't told him because she wanted to be loved without it. She had removed the money, removed the name, removed the estate, removed the inheritance, and offered him herself. Just herself. And he had looked at herself and decided it wasn't enough. I was wrong, he said. His voice broke slightly on the last word. He hadn't cried in years, had trained himself not to, but something was cracking. Something he'd built too quickly over something that wasn't solid. I know you were, she said. I was cruel to you. Yes. I called you. He stopped. The words he had said to her, ordinary, unconnected, not presentable, were too shameful to repeat in this room, in this house, with her sitting across from him like this. I said terrible things. You did. Amara. He leaned forward, his elbows on his knees, his hands clasped, his eyes red. I am begging you. I know I don't deserve anything from you. But please, I need you to know that I'm sorry, that I understand what I lost. You didn't lose me because I was poor, she said. Her voice was completely level. Not cold, not angry, just true in the way that only things that have been understood for a long time can sound. You lost me because you thought I was. You looked at me every day for 7 years, and you decided I wasn't enough because I wasn't performing the kind of wealth you respected. But Daniel, I was never performing anything. I was just living. I was just being. And that wasn't enough for you. He had no response to that. Because there was no response. It was the most accurate thing anyone had ever said to him. I would have given you everything, she continued quietly. Not the money. Not the estate. Me. I would have given you all of me. And you handed me a suitcase and told me to be gone before 10. A tear ran down his face. He didn't wipe it. I know. You were in love with what you wanted to be, she said. Not with me. Not really. And I spent too long hoping that would change. The room was completely still. He asked the question he wasn't sure he had the right to ask. Is there any, he stopped, swallowed. Is there any version of a conversation where this isn't over? She looked at him for a long moment, the kind of look that holds 7 years inside it. Then she stood. The version you're looking for doesn't exist, she said gently. Not because I hate you. I don't. But because you taught me something, Daniel. You taught me that some people have to lose something before they can see it. And I was not put on this earth to be the thing someone loses in order to grow. She crossed to the doorway, paused. I do hope you find what you're looking for, she said. I genuinely do. Then she walked out, and the door closed softly behind her. Not slammed, not locked, just closed. And that was the thing Daniel could never quite shake afterward. Not the wealth he had thrown away, not the embarrassment of the news cycle that briefly made him a cautionary tale in business circles. Not even Vivian leaving 3 weeks later when she realized the man she'd moved in with was hollowed out and useless to her ambitions. What he couldn't shake was the door closing softly. Because anger he could have worked with. Anger meant he still had some grip on the situation. Anger meant she still cared enough to make noise. But that soft, deliberate close, the sound of someone who had made complete peace with a chapter, was something he heard in quiet rooms for the rest of his life. He had called her ordinary. She had been extraordinary in ways he was never equipped to see. Amara, for her part, did not spend her days thinking about Daniel. She was, for the first time in years, simply herself. She threw herself into the work of her father's company. Not because she had to, but because she wanted to understand the world he had built before he left it. She sat in board meetings and asked sharp questions and earned the respect of people who had expected, based on nothing, that she would be decorative. She was not decorative. She was, as anyone who paid attention should have noticed long ago, deeply capable, quietly determined, the kind of person who observes far more than she reveals and understands far more than she says. She did not date for a long time, not because she was broken, but because she had discovered something on the other side of that rainy night, that she was deeply, genuinely fine alone, that her own company was enough, that peace was not something she needed to borrow from another person's approval. When people asked her, in interviews, whether she had any regrets about the years she had spent living away from her family's estate, she always gave the same answer. She said, I learned who I was when everything I came from was taken out of the equation. That's not something you can buy. The interviewers always nodded, as if they understood. Most of them didn't. But the people who needed to, the people watching from their own rainy doorways, their own suitcase moments, their own quiet griefs, those people understood exactly what she meant. There is a particular kind of arrogance that mistakes simplicity for smallness, that looks at a person who doesn't perform and decides there's nothing underneath. It is one of the most expensive mistakes a human being can make, not in money, but in meaning. Because the people who have the least to prove are often the ones who have everything. And by the time you realize it, the gate is already closed. Daniel realized it. Too late, but he realized it. And sometimes that's the whole story. Not the revenge. Not the twist. Not the number at the bottom of someone's balance sheet. Sometimes the story is simply this. A woman who knew her worth so completely that she never once argued for it. Who walked into the rain with one suitcase and walked out of a marriage without burning a single thing down. Who said, one day you'll beg to know who you asked to leave. And then made peace with the fact that when that day came, it would no longer be her problem. That kind of dignity doesn't have a price tag. It never did. If the story moved you, hit the like button right now. It helps more people find stories like this one. And drop a comment. Would you have told your partner the truth from the beginning? We genuinely want to know what you think. For more stories that reveal what people only discover when it's too late, make sure you subscribe to this channel and turn on the notification bell so you never miss a single upload. Every story we tell is for the person who needed to hear it today. And today, this one was for you.